How busy are you this time of year, Jeremy?
Very. Obviously, it's transfer window time. We've obviously got heavy fixture schedule as well, and then of course there are certain things going on at the club which we'll delve into. Where it's taking a little bit of extra time out of my schedule in terms of doing investigations of injuries and this kind of thing, and kind of building the programs that we've talked about in the past about building up. So very, very busy right now.
Yeah, good that you remind me of the injuries. I almost forgot to. But is it like extra intense for you this time of year because you're working on more of the strategic stuff? So normally that's kind of like zooming out from what's going on in this particular window, and maybe Mika and Mehmet and Hirish and those guys are more busy now. But do you also get dragged into that a lot, so it gets more intense for you? Yeah,
that's a really good question. My aim is to not do that, and I mentioned it to Frederick quite a lot when I came on board at the club. Is you don't want my position, whether it's me, whether it's whoever, you don't want the position of head of strategy to get dragged too much into operational stuff on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. The problem with that is obviously putting in place structures and frameworks. You need to be there. You need to be on the, on the coalface, as they say. So, it's a bit of a balancing act, because if you're in it, you can't be looking above and seeing where the patterns are and what things need to change and where the trends are going and how we can stop a certain trend from happening or continue another one. So it's a really good question, that one. It's how much to be involved and how much to zoom out.
But does it also work kind of like user feedback in a sense of seeing how they work and how they operate, and that's where you pick up things? Yeah, so obviously it was a long time ago now. Well, it feels like a long time ago. When I first started, the first thing to do was the audit. Yeah. And that was a big project. It was sitting down with absolutely everyone to delve into what they do, how they do it. So I got a very good idea very quickly about the way that the club worked in terms of the sporting departments. Now it's about reviewing some of that. So obviously at the start of this year was putting in place some really good structures. Meeting structures is a good one. Mm-hmm. There wasn't anything structured. Yeah, I can imagine. So it was one of those things where people would come in, do their job, obviously talk during the day, but then go home. There wasn't this kind of meeting with agenda items. Here, we need to do this. We need to do this. Here's a task for us to do over the coming weeks. Mm-hmm. So those kind of things were put in place at the start of the year. Mika was very used to working that way at his previous club, so it was quite an easy thing to get going from his side as well. But regular meetings with the head coach from his perspective. I mean, they have weekly meetings. They discuss the game. They discuss players. There's lots of really good feedback from him to Jose and from Jose to him about what's needed and how we can help and support him. So, all of those things needed to be put in place, and you need to be there every day to make those things happen. Mm-hmm. because people aren't used to it. Yeah. They don't know what it looks like. Yeah. So sitting down, getting it done, getting people going, and then once people are used to it, you can kind of let that go, and it will then become an iCore thing. Yeah. So it will go in a different direction to what it would look like at another club. Yeah. So for me, that's the really nice thing about this, is you're setting up frameworks which then kind of end up with a life of their own, and they become something maybe different to what you thought they would be. But you need to set it up first, then let people take control. Because it's not intuitive to people if they haven't had a structured way of working before, right? Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it, but you actually have to see it. Exactly. People, you don't know what good looks like. Yep. So you kind of give people the tools to go away and start doing it. And I think there are certain departments that are running really well at the moment. And I think probably because of the leadership within those departments, they're kind of used to it. So like I say, recruitment is running really quite well. What parts of it? I think in terms of the alignment of everyone, so people aren't going off in their own different directions. There are player profiles in place. The data is matched to that. The way that Mika works is very much data-driven, but then the delving into the tactical and the video side. Obviously, you had Mehmet on the show the other day, who's excellent at that. So when he brings a player, so after the data's been filtering the players, he then brings a player and says, "I've watched this player, I really like him." Suddenly, people jump into action because already that it's not going to be a player that falls outside. Whereas before, I think there was a little bit of people were unsure. So someone would say, "I've got this player," and you think, that doesn't fit the strategy, it doesn't fit the age profile, it doesn't fit what we're looking for in that position. But by the time Mehmet brings it up, it's already past all of the filterings to the point where it's actually relevant to talk about the player. Exactly. So you know that if he brings a player, it's like, okay, this is going to be good. Yeah. So if I'm asked, it's not necessarily my role, but if I'm asked, can you
take a look on the video as well, just to see what you think, then I already know that the player's going to be of a certain type, a certain quality, a certain level. And so it's not about, is the player good? It's then about, okay, from the conversations we've had in terms of the strategy, where does this player fit? Is he going to be let's say a mid-promotion player who's going to build up? Is this a player that we can spend this amount of money on? And then my mind starts thinking about the strategy. How does this fit into the structure? And then I'm ahead of the game. So if someone comes, so let's say Mika comes to me and says, yeah, we are going to trigger that. We're going to go for that player. How does this look? Then we can start to have a conversation about, okay, look, Mika, if you think that this is going to be the transfer fee and this is the kind of basic package in terms of salary, if you sign this player, you're not going to be able to sign that player that you talked about earlier in the window. Is that okay with you? If you sign this player, it might block this avenue. So I'm then starting to give him feedback on what that looks like. So then he gets ahead of the game when it comes to presenting to the board. So when we go and do that, there's no question marks because we already know that it's aligned with strategy, it's aligned with player profiles, it's aligned with. So do you see what I mean? It's that kind. That's where the recruitment department is very, very proactive.
Yeah. Would ideally that be systematized as well, so he doesn't have to come to you, but he can actually just put the player into the system and see how does that affect the outcome of other things?
In the end, yes. At the moment, it's a little bit manual.
Okay.
So I'm trying to automatize that process so that he can just kind of do a few clicks, get a report back, and it has everything in it. But at the moment, you're talking about calculations about return on investment. You're talking about calculations about, run rates and how it affects the budget for year 1, year 2, year 3.
Well, all of that is data anyway, so it's just about building, I'm not trivializing it, but in the end, I can envision how, as a sporting director, I might want to play around with different scenarios, and then in the end, I feel that okay, that's the one we're going for.
Yeah, and that's the fun part. So we've actually built a scenario model.
Oh, nice.
So basically we can plug in a player and we can look at, okay, if we take that player, and that player, and we sell that player, and that player goes on loan, how does that look for 12 months time, 24 months time? So actually those kind of questions are, that's basically my role, is to try and end up in a position where I can almost step away from the recruitment side completely and go, guys, you've got all the tools you need.
Yeah.
Everything's aligned. I don't need to kind of touch this area again. I now need to focus on other areas, which is really what I'm trying to do at the moment. I'm trying to get out of this kind of transfer window, stress on that side, and kind of move into other areas and help those departments to build the same structures. And by the end of my time here, whenever that happens to be, the idea is that my role won't be obsolete necessarily, but basically it should be running almost without
you're
me.
Trying to build a full self-driving football club, right?
Yeah.
So anything is already there's no contradictions in terms of what to do. Everything is kind of getting obvious because it's already in place what we should do, and then with all the systems in place, the more your goal, your measuring stick is how much can I remove myself from the equation of every part of the club.
Yeah, which is it's a really strange thing, right? I'm trying to make myself, not needed. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, from that perspective, it's going to take a while to get to that stage. It's going to, there's a long building process for that, and each department's going to take a different amount of time. But
you'll never get there because in the end, the next step is how do we win the Champions League? There's always something more to strive for. So you'll never get there, but I see. It's a fascinating role, and it's intriguing for me. I love those kind of tasks, and when building a business is like how do I remove myself from this and this, but ensuring that we get 95% of the quality if I did it manually myself.
Yeah, exactly. And it's about supporting you can't automate a decision-making process, but what you can do is you can automate how that information is given. And then, and this is what I said to Frederick a long time ago when I first joined the club, is kind of almost the aim is to kind of arrive at the training ground. I heard a story a long time ago about Paolo Maldini, who obviously has done everything there is to do in the game. But when he was at AC Milan, his role, because there were so many members of staff and it's a massive club, his role really was more ambassadorial.
Okay.
So he would arrive at the stadium, have a cup of coffee, do some meetings, come to the training ground, have a cup of coffee, meet some of the players, have a couple of meetings, and go home, right?
Yeah.
So, I'm sure there are lots more things that he would do, but that was the kind of story I was told about how he's kind of, quite relaxed around the place, understands the club inside out, and that was his kind of role, was more kind of relationships. That's where you want to be in the end.
Yeah.
You want everything to be automated so that your daily tasks, you're not stuck doing those and not really zooming out and being able to talk to people. Because actually, all of that information is about having good conversations. That's why, if I go back to the meeting structure that we mentioned before, it's about talking. The worst thing you can have at a football club is silos, little kingdoms that people are in. Oh, this is my department. I do this. I don't talk to that guy. I don't need to. We're running our department well. Who cares about anything else? It's not about that. It's about conversations between people. So having all the information that you need to then sit in a room and go, okay, here's the data. Here's the information that you need to be able to make these decisions. Okay, if you do this, this is the ramification. If you do this, this could cause a problem. If you do this, I don't think there's going to be any support for that. You can make that decision if you want, but it doesn't really fit with the strategy. Whatever the conversation happens to be, you can have that conversation. But if you don't have any of the information at hand, how do you make a proper decision? And that's the biggest thing is when people talk about being a data-driven club, I actually think that's not the aim. The aim is to make really good decisions, be a club that makes consistently good decisions. Yeah,
the data is just a vehicle to get there.
Exactly. And so that's where I get a little bit kind of, for me, a little bit confused about the kind of, when you hear that, it's data-driven and well, yeah, kind of. But no, it's about having really good conversations with really good information so you can make good decisions. That's all it is, really. Yeah,
that makes sense. Looking back at your period, you've been here for just about like 1 year and change, right?
Yeah, March last year,
Yeah. What has the first period been like, both from the perspective of what you had to work on, but also in terms of like, is it what you expected? Are you stimulated? Does it drive you the way it did with building Analytics FC?
Yeah, I think there was definitely more to do than I thought. I think I expected a little bit more structure. It's not to say that the club was completely unstructured. I'm not saying that at all, but I think there's definitely more to do than I thought. But in terms of kind of piecing the puzzle together, I think we've put in place some really big pieces. So I'm really kind of quite proud of that period, especially toward the end of last season, kind of November, December time. So when we knew that Fredrik Wiese was leaving, but there was no head of recruitment in place, head coach. We needed to start that process. Obviously, we knew that a decision was going to be made on the previous head coach quite early. So, kind of felt a little bit together with Fredrik, where I was like, well, I've got to keep the ship rolling here on my own a little bit, because there's no one else in the kind of senior sports management positions to kind of lean on here. So
the exact role you did not want, you ended up in.
Exactly. That's exactly true. And I kind of felt like, okay, let's get this done then. We've got a short period of time. So my job really was to keep the ship sailing in the correct direction without doing anything which would impede the incoming people. So my job wasn't to make transfers, go and find this player or that player. My job was to make sure that the process for hiring the head of recruitment was solid and was carrying on at speed, to get the process for hiring the head coach down to a certain level, because we didn't have time to wait until Mika was on board to then start the process. Absolutely impossible. We wouldn't have had a head coach until April probably. So the idea was, let's get all of this ticking along, and then when Mika arrived, there was already a very small group of kind of small shortlist for him to pick from. So we already got down to that and had all those 3-4 meetings with the coaches that we needed to, looked at the data and broke that all down. So all of that was kind of ticking along in the background. And then of course there was still players' contracts to deal with, so there was still some renewals to do. There were some transfers that had already been agreed, so we were getting those over the line, getting all the contracts done, getting the final negotiations done. So that was probably the most stressful period. Where
talk about a baptism of fire of doing this without money too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think at that point the money part was less of an issue, because none of those things were really money things. They were just basically making sure that things didn't crumble before the reinforcements arrived, let's say, so with Mika and with Jose. Obviously doing that together with Fredrik Söderberg. So so that bit I think was all getting those pieces of the jigsaw in place and making sure that we were on time just about with that for the start of the next season. That was really important. And actually that's worked out really quite well, I've got to say. I mean, okay, head coaches go up and down in terms of results and in terms of the way that they're perceived, but in terms of his working methods, Jose's been excellent. I mean, really, really so good in terms of work. He's a real club coach. So when you put in place a framework and say, this is how we need to work for the coming season, 2 seasons, 3 seasons. There's never been any argument about that, ever. It's just, yes, I understand. And we recruited him for that purpose as well. It wasn't like we left him in the dark, recruited him, and then told him about the framework. We explained it as we went through the interview process. So any of the kind of shortlist at the end, I think, would have stepped in and understood how we worked. But he's really kind of embraced that, and he doesn't complain. So when you have a situation like the weekend, where you've got lots of academy players playing, it's just another week for him. It's, okay, I'll get a plan done. We'll put this together. We'll recover from the previous week. Maybe the plan wasn't the right one the previous week. We'll get it done. So in that sense, we've got the right guy on board there. So that's one big piece of the jigsaw. And then I'd also say that Mycket fits absolutely perfectly. So yeah, I really enjoy working with him.
Yeah, I think the consensus among pretty much all the fans, I mean, it goes up and down every week what the consensus is, but I haven't seen almost a single opinion saying that we should change coach. And that, I mean, everybody gets kind of like a honeymoon for the first, 6 months or so. But everyone has been more aligned. And when I say everyone, I'm talking about the supporters here. Has been more aligned around this coach even when things look terrible than I've almost ever seen. They complain about the players rather than the coach when the performances are bad. But it feels like everybody has taken a deep breath and is trusting Jose.
Yeah, and I think that's something which, for me, I think is really great, and I think it's something that this club, I don't know how it's been in the past, but to be fair, I thought they were quite supportive of Mitchell as well during last season. I think they're quite a supportive supporter base, which is really great. I think it also doesn't always align with what you see behind the scenes. I've been at clubs where internally you've got a coach who's brilliant, does everything in terms of quality training sessions, deals with the players really well, everything about the way that they work in terms of the way that they are polite to staff, even, the cleaners and do you know what I mean? The kind of really good person. And then the results turn and they're kind of vilified by the supporters, and you kind of think, that's really unfair. This guy's really good. If we give him support, he can be really good for this club. But there's a point, obviously, where, it becomes too much and then a change gets made with the head coach. So I'm really pleased that there's an alignment between what we see internally and what the supporters see on the pitch and externally, and the way that they've that they've kind of taken to Jose. That for me is really pleasing, because that alignment isn't always the case.
And I think part of it, I mean, he's a good communicator too, so he's kind of earning the trust as well by just the way he carries himself. But I think also it's actually, you'd have to look at the way the board has been communicating, the way Fredrik Söderberg has been communicating, like the way everybody has been communicating in one direction. We're going to do this. It's going to take some time. It's going to be a bumpy ride, but we think that this is the right decision. Bringing you on, letting Thomas Berntsen go. There's so many decisions in a row now that is kind of pointing in the same direction, that people feel that there's some kind of consistency in what we're trying to do. And that, I think, also builds trust, as opposed to pivoting all the time and saying, no, this time we've figured it out.
Yeah, and I think that's been the nice thing about since I arrived at the club. I know that there was some mistakes made before in previous times, but since I've been at the club, every decision has felt like, whether I've agreed with the decision or not, it's felt like it's in line with the strategy. So you almost can't argue with it. There are different ways to get there. You can obviously go left and go right, but you're still going in the same general direction, still moving forward. But I feel like the decisions that are being made, like you say, are completely in line with the next step. So to me, it breeds confidence inside the organization as well. So obviously it breeds confidence outside, and like you say, that means that people aren't as nervous about things. If you completely change direction, everyone thinks, well, what the hell's going on?
From my perspective as a supporter now, it feels like the most important thing right now is to not mess with things.
Yeah.
It's to not change the organization or try to install a new position above you, or try to find a way to, break what we are currently putting in place and have put in place, but just let it cook.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly it. It's difficult, isn't it, to keep your hands off something? But I think you're absolutely right. I think the other thing internally is it gives confidence that you're not. So I mean, we'll come to it when it comes to the kind of injury side of things. But for example, that department doesn't feel. Well, I'm putting words in their mouth a little bit, but I feel like they don't feel like they're being, let's say, questioned. It's not that their jobs are on the line because they haven't done this or this. They feel like, right, we're all moving in the same direction. We all want to get better every day. We all want to make improvements. And therefore, doing something that helps us improve together is positive. And therefore, we're on board. We'll help do this. We're not going to kind of hide away or kind of say, well, actually, I don't want to give that bit of information because that makes me look bad. There's none of that at all. So I think what's nice is that internally you get that confidence. So by following those steps, by going in the right direction, by always trying to make decisions that fit that strategy, everyone can be confident that actually we're doing this all together. Whereas I think if you were to move away from that, suddenly people start asking questions about, is that a political thing? Why was that decision made? That's a bit weird. That doesn't really fit. Oh, what's happening underneath or what's happening behind the scenes? So I think that's also, again, breeding that confidence, both externally and internally.
Yeah. Historically, one of the biggest challenges for this club has been, I don't know if I should call it corruption, but it's been like the fact that it's owned by the members has meant that time and time again, people have tried to gain influence. People are trying to get into positions of power, or they try to, find a new board to put in place, or it's been people that want information or status or influence or all these kind of things. And that's the downside with democracy, right? It's that it's prone for, or it's open to corruption. Whereas if you buy a club and you own the club, nobody else from the outside can come in and influence things. So I just hope that this time, since everybody feels like we're behind this, that we keep our hands off of things and just let the people inside of the club do their work right now.
Yeah, I think that would be appreciated internally for sure. I've always tried to stay away from the political side. I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to, the reason that I want the operations inside the club to get better is so we win football matches, and you want to win football matches because you want to win championships. I'm a bit kind of like, how do we beat the other guy? I'm not really about, how do you maneuver yourself into a position of power, or how do you do this inside a club? I've never been interested in that stuff at all. I just, head down, focus on what we need to do and try and get to the goal and achieve our objectives.
Yeah. Are you at all involved in the recruiting process of the CEO as well? Because I figured that like maybe some of the data you can find if we're sourcing candidates from other football clubs, or do they not bring you in for that?
No, that's above my pay grade.
Because I would imagine that like if I was chairman of the board or a board member, when sourcing candidates, one of the data points I would like to look at is, let's assume the candidate is somebody that has been running a football club in the past. I would want to know, how did that club develop during his tenure, right?
That's an interesting one. I mean, look, sure, if Mikko Joma wants to ask for certain data points or wants to, get some research done, I'm not sure where I fit that in my schedule, but I'm more than happy to provide that, no problem at all.
Because I imagine you looked at that when recruiting the head of recruitment, right? You were looking at like, okay, during his tenure, what happened to the club?
Yep.
Like how did these and these and these KPIs develop? And it's very measurable for a CEO as well to see how did the club develop. So anyway, it's just something I wanted to bring up. We already talked a little bit about the transfer window, but we got off to one hell of a start with this transfer window with a pretty big transfer. How was the period for you when interest was starting to pop up for Zadok Yohanna?
Yeah, so obviously we had, I think people kind of, as the transfer window goes on, people kind of forget how it kind of started, if that makes sense. So yeah, obviously our objective in this window was, and actually it even starts before that. It obviously starts with the bringing in Jose as the head coach, because we need those players to actually get on the pitch. We need to be able to play young players and to drive the value of those players, including Zadok. Because people forget, it's not just about having some good young players, because Zadok was here last year and played left wing back. Yeah. So it really is about having a coach that's going to then play that player in his strongest position and try and develop that player through. So that was the first kind of part of the puzzle is, let's get that working. Let's get these young players playing. develop the value of them. Then, first part of the transfer window, player sales. We needed to make sure that was done. We were pretty confident that Zadok was going to be the one that went for the highest amount of money, and obviously we needed to manage that process. Coming back to kind of supporting Mika in his processes, he's a very, very good negotiator.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Because he's negotiating 20 times what he's used to all of a sudden.
Yeah, but I mean, really, let's say, doesn't get pushed around, really firm. So, I mean, in terms of him, really good operator on the transfer side, both incoming and outgoing, won't overpay either. So knows exactly what we need to do, how we need to do it, how much we should be paying for a player, and then doesn't get pushed, past what he feels is right. So I think in that sense, we got a really good deal, obviously, for Zadok. From there, it's then about, if I'm honest, managing expectations. And that includes Mika. So if we go back to kind of providing that information, the question after the sale was, how much do we have to spend?
Yep.
And that question comes up a lot, right? It's like, oh, well, we must have money to spend now. I think there are two parts of that. Bringing in a big transfer fee is great for cash flow.
Yep.
So can we spend transfer fees now? Yes.
If you have liquidity.
Exactly. So if you go back to the previous transfer window, we didn't have any cash. So, everything has to be a free transfer. And even a free transfer, there's still money that goes out to agents up front. So there's still, sign-on bonuses, whatever. So in terms of actually having upfront cash to be able to sign a player, I mean, really difficult. Suddenly we have the cash. So that's not the issue anymore. But we have to respect that there's a cost reduction program in place, and we're trying to bring down those player costs. So when the question becomes, okay, how much do we have to spend? Well, it's not about how much we have to spend, it's about how much is in the budget. And if we're still above our budget in terms of player costs, then the answer is, technically, the answer is nothing. Yeah,
because there's no room in the run rate.
There's no room. So then it becomes about, okay, well, now we have the cash and we've got a little bit of a let's say a buffer. How much can we increase the costs knowing that we're going to bring those costs down later? So before, if we said, hey, can we sign these two players because we're going to sell these two? It would be like, no. You got to sell those two first before you can sign a player.
So it's like a run rate credit.
Exactly. So now when we present to the board, it's slightly different because you can say, look, let's invest in this player. I think this is a good idea to invest now. It does put us slightly above budget, but our plan is to do this, and this to bring that back down again. And then you have a little bit more of leeway, and the board are a little bit more open to having that kind of conversation now than they previously were. So, and that's correct, absolutely correct. And we probably wouldn't take some of the, the proposals that we're taking now to the board. We wouldn't take them to the board at all, because I would say to Mika, there's absolutely no chance that happens. So I know you want to do this, and this. I know that, we trust that you will do these things, but you can't expect the club to put themselves in a financial position. Whereas now there's a little bit more leeway to do that. So, like I say, when it comes to how much have we got to spend, it's not really linked to how much did we sell Zadok for. It's more to do with, okay, if we're going to have this as our cost base, if that's our aim. And by the way, I've got to say, when it comes to having that kind of cost base, a kind of lower cost base for players, I think it also, and I think people need to understand this, it's really helpful for us in the long term when it comes to results. So, which is a really weird thing to say. I'm saying spending less on players helps us with the results.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is that cost base is sustainable. So therefore, we don't have to sell.
Oh, yeah.
So if we had the cost base that we had previously with all those players who were on, let's be honest, for us, really big money, it means that you basically have to sell all of your assets, every single transfer window, to be able to afford to keep that level of spend on player salaries. Yeah. So you're basically selling 3-4, high-level talents, or even you're selling your best players to then go and refill that. So the way that we see it is that actually bringing that cost level down means that we're in a position where we don't need to sell. Yeah. We will, because we want to keep, we want to, obviously there's a slight gap in terms of the cost and the revenues that the clubs have, that the club has each year. So we need to fill that gap.
Yeah, the deficit.
Exactly. But we don't need to do too much. If the cost base is lower, it means that deficit is lower. So it means that we don't have to sell 10 million euros, 15 million euros of player every single transfer, every single year to cover that gap. We can sell 3 or 4, and that means that might be one player.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're selling one, but now you can, move around in the squad, you can change things, you can adjust things, and we can actually keep a stable squad that can challenge for titles. I see it in Sweden quite a lot at the moment, where you've got entire teams that are completely destroyed in 2 transfer windows. It's not the same team from the previous period, and not because the sporting director wanted to change things, but because, the offers came in, the club won't survive without taking that money. So I think we're in a position now where bringing that cost base down actually helps us in the long term. I know that's a weird thing to say, but I think it does.
Yeah, and it is counterintuitive, because it has almost become a meme, and I think it's true as well, that the correlation between salary spend and league titles is as strong as it's undeniable. Basically, the teams that spend the most win the most titles. So if you look at the Premier League, the table is essentially representative of what they spend, with a few exceptions, like Brighton will be up there even though they spend less and whatnot. But what you're saying here, just to translate it for the listeners, is that bringing your cost base down so your deficit is smaller, which is in Sweden it's underskott, driftsunderskott, is smaller, means that you've put less pressure on yourself to capitalize on players earlier. You can hold them longer, which means you could, in a few years, you could hold a player like Zadok. Maybe he was too unique because he went
possibly.
He went to the moon in terms of pricing. But as somebody that is like the 0.8 version of Zadok, you could hold on to him for longer, which means you increase your chances of winning the title, reaching Europe, etc. But if you increase your deficit every year, you put enough pressure on yourself that if 1 or 2 players get injured, well, now you got to sell the 2 best players because there's no other chips to play with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I couldn't have put it better myself. In fact, that was probably the better answer. But that's exactly it. It really is. Obviously, spending on good players is the thing, and we need to make enough good decisions to fill the squad full of really, really good players. And that doesn't necessarily mean younger players, as Mika has made clear. That there needs to be a mix of older and younger. But at the same time, I think this is the right way to go. And if it means in the future that, let's say we're qualifying for Europe regularly, and that means that the cost base can go up.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fine. That's not the issue. It's more about making sure that we're not in a position, as you mentioned, that we have to, sell the family silver every time, every year.
Because I think that's an extremely important point what you just said there. The goal should be to bring up the cost base over time still, because you're increasing your revenue. Yeah. So if you're increasing your revenue, there's no value in bringing down the cost every year. You don't. It doesn't win titles to cut your cost base by 4% each year. In the end, if you consistently sell players for 20 million euros each year, well, now you can spend more on players and salaries and so forth. If you qualify for the European group stages or league stages, you can also drive up your cost base. But you're saying that the intermittent step, or the step in between, is to first bring it down so you don't put pressure on yourself. Now you can hold your assets until they reach max value, then you capitalize, and then you slowly bring it back up again.
Exactly. You bring it back up in a way that's manageable. Yep. And so you can say, well, actually, do you know what? Our player sales have been fantastic for the last 3 years. We can cope with a slight increase in our cost base. Let's do that. Let's strategically up the cost base. Really go for it. Let's try and cement a position in that top 3, or even, depending on where we're at that particular time, where we're saying, let's go for the title now. We've got a 3-year period. Here's where we'll set the money aside. Here's what we're going to do. And so if you're always chasing your tail and the cost is so high, and you're just having to sell all the time, and it's just a consistent turnover of players, I'm not sure how you win championships doing that.
Yeah. But is it hard to keep your hands off? Because let's say you've found a lot of alpha right now in terms of valuable assets. Let's say you're doing a great job with Transfer Lab, and you're finding all these players that are undervalued, they're young, and you feel like, well, it's almost like shooting fish in a barrel right now. We can find so many players that we could develop, and if we place enough bets, there's no way we won't make money. That, at least to me, would make me impatient. That let's just grab these players and just bring them into the squad, and then we'll make money.
Yeah, and I think the investment part, that's the bit that we're talking at the moment internally about, is where do we make these strategic investments? So obviously, Nana Kofi Donko, for me, really, really interesting player, really interesting investment, good price, and yeah.
What do you like about that investment particularly? In
terms of the profile of the player, I don't want to say this because it's going to end up being the headline everywhere, but his data, it's proportional, of course, because his data is in Georgia. But if you put his
I know where you're going.
If you put his data right next to Zadok's data, so Allsvenskan Zadok against Georgian League Nani Kofi Donko, it looks almost identical.
Yeah. Now,
obviously, he needs to make the transition to here. He needs to get used to the level. But of course, the same thing applies to Zadok in Brighton, right? Do we think Zadok's going to be a top Premier League player? I think he could be. So I think that jump, players need to make that jump at some point, right?
Yeah, so, and he had to make it from Nigeria to AEK anyway. So Georgia to AEK is...
Exactly. So I think in terms of the profile, I think what I like about it is that you can really see another potential player that could make an impact, that could get bums off seats.
Yeah.
A player that's exciting. He's not just a 1v1 player. He can play inside, he can play outside. He's got vision. You can see in some of his matches where he's playing really interesting through balls, got a nice first touch. So, yeah, really interesting profile. Let's see, give him time to transition over. Unfortunately, there's an enforced period of transition time because he's not eligible to play. So that's a little bit of an unfortunate...
Can he play for the academy team or...?
He actually is still eligible to play under 19 football, but that's still an official game. So he's technically not allowed to play any official matches, but we can play friendly games and he can play in those.
Would it be an idea to loan him back to his former club?
It's something that we've discussed, not to his former club, but a loan is possible. It's something that
But that means he's representing a third club anyway, right?
No. So this is where it gets all very complicated. We're in a summer season.
Oh,
so
I see.
We could loan him to a team in a winter season.
I see.
And he would be eligible for them and also eligible for us when we restart next year. So it's a little bit...
That's good news, though.
Weird. Yeah, so it does give us some options. So, but as a profile, really interesting profile, really good investment. So that's one type of investment, and we can continue to do those without pushing the cost base up too much. Mm-hmm. So each one of those is not a bad way to go. If we want to go for a player that's a little bit more established, then suddenly the cost base starts to jump a little bit more quickly. If they're not a free transfer, if they're a free transfer, it's not a big issue. So bringing in players like Cisse, for example, doesn't increase the cost base that much, even though you're bringing a player that's very experienced, unfortunately injured right now. But
yeah. But and then Linus, of course, is the third category.
Yes, Linus kind of fits a little bit in between. Uh-huh. So we're talking about a relatively substantial transfer fee, but for a player that is that we obviously see as a starting 11 player, a player who it's interesting. The underlying data on him was really quite strong. Then we looked back at his video for Gothenburg, and also looked at his games when he was on loan. I mean, you could see so many interesting traits, even in the games that he was playing for Gothenburg. Obviously, with Gothenburg, he was playing out of position most of the time, playing on the wing, although he did that for us at the weekend. So, yeah, you could see that there were mitigating factors as to why he maybe wasn't successful with Gothenburg over that period, and playing small, bit part substitute appearances, etc., etc. So we feel like that's a really, again, a solid bet.
Do you think that over time, as the data scouting approach is going to get more and more exploited, more competitive, do you think that looking for those kind of more subtle signals where players are being misused, so to speak, is where the value is going to develop? Possibly. I think with TransferLab we can kind of look back in time as well, so we can see. I mean, one really interesting kind of market opportunity that you can do with TransferLab, which potentially, not to name the other company, but potentially is not possible with a Jamestown, is because we have access to all of that data through a platform, we can go and delve into this stuff ourselves. So we can come up with kind of, let's say, theories in our mind and then go and test those theories. So one theory that we've discussed internally quite a lot is, why don't we go back to 2024, look at players that got sold or 2025 even, and look at players that got sold for too much money. We couldn't afford them. We were not in that ballpark. We could not have afforded that player at the time. Yeah.
And then look at where they went and if they've managed to get game time. And if they've gone too high too quick. If you can find players like that have gone too high too quick, and then essentially assess whether, was it a mistake? Was it a transfer mistake by the buying club? Or whether this is a player that just hasn't been able to break into a team that's gone too high, and then exploit that, and you can come in and get a player for way, way undervalued. So there are kind of it's utilizing the data, but through kind of football knowledge, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's the football people discussing, have we thought about this? Is there a market opportunity here? Can we look at that through the data and then go and find interesting names that we can then explore?
Oh, I see. So you're
doing it backwards.
Yeah, you're developing the hypothesis by what you know about football, and you convert that into an algorithm.
Exactly, and that's where it starts to become really fun.
Yeah.
So that's where you can start to build really interesting ways of exploiting the market by using football knowledge to then go and test it, go and find the players that fit that, and then go and exploit the fact that you should be getting that player undervalued, or at least undervalued to what he was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, for me, it's one of those where that's where the value of a tool like TransferLab comes into play, is that it's not just me that gets to sit there and go, oh, okay, let's investigate the data, or let's interrogate the data. Mehmed could do that. He could sit there and go, I've got an idea. What about this? What about exploring this? He can then delve into the platform, start to find this stuff, and then come back at the recruitment meeting on Tuesdays and go, guys, I got a really good idea. One thing that he did, actually, I'll let you into one bit of info. I really liked this. I thought this was really excellent from him. He went away and looked at the best players. So let's say the subjectively best players in Allsvenskan for the last 5 years. He then put them in the data and said, right, let's compare them for every single position. Mm-hmm. So centre back, left back, right back, midfield, 8, 6, 8, 10, winger, striker, and looked at what traits they all have. And basically he selected like almost every metric in the platform and went, right, well, that doesn't correlate, so I'll delete that one, I'll delete that one, I'll delete that. And you get left with about 12 things, let's say 12 metrics, where if you want to be a top striker in Allsvenskan for the last 5 years, the best strikers have had these 12 things. Then you can interrogate the data and go, okay, which players across the world have those 12 things?
Wow.
So again, it's taking football knowledge first. It's kind of saying, right, let's take the subjectively best players that have really made an impact in Allsvenskan, and then it's saying, right, how do we use the data to go and investigate that? So this is what I like about, essentially, like I said before at the start of the interview, was it's about giving the tools to people and then letting them run, and they'll go off in a completely different direction to what another club would do.
Yeah.
But it's, for me, that's the interesting thing about this, is being able to then say, okay, well, which direction are you going and why are you going in that direction? What a great idea. Off you go. It's perfect.
Yeah, so you basically, everybody has the same data, right? Because there are these labs that are mining the data or providing the data for everybody. But then it's what kind of a scavenger hunt are you going out for? Like, what's the hypothesis you develop in your head, and then you build basically like an algorithm or filterings for trying to find everything that fits that, and then testing it to see, am I going down the right path here or not? Does this look like something that could be valuable to us?
Yeah. And then once you found one and it works, then you find a second one, a third one, a fourth one, a fifth one, and you end up with this nice little kind of bundle of, hey, we've got these 5 things that we know work really well. And then you're off and running, and it's specific to this club.
Yeah. Could you also elaborate a little bit? Some people are, I think, struggling to understand the difference between working together with Jamestown, I should say, because Jamestown is the company, right? It's not a tool that you sign up for with a subscription. Can you speak to the difference between having your own tool like TransferLab within AIK as opposed to signing up for a partnership together with Jamestown?
Yeah, obviously I can't speak too much about what they do. I haven't been part of their company, but my understanding from speaking to clubs that are signed up to Jamestown is that essentially they get provided with kind of lists. The only problem, obviously, there's lists and there's kind of a number that goes with it. Obviously, I don't know if there's more than that, but that's kind of the information that I've picked up over conversations. The problem with that is that you have to have a lot of trust that the people providing you with that list understand your context. And obviously we've talked a lot about strategy and what we're looking for and the profiles that we're looking for and how it fits in terms of the cost levels for each type of player and how much we can spend and can't spend and which markets work for Allsvenskan and which don't. All of these kind of things, I think you
parameters.
You kind of need to be inside the club to understand that. So being given a list, get a list of players that look good in the data, cool. But at the same time, if we get provided a really good example, let's say you get provided with a 23-year-old winger. Okay, got a 23-year-old winger. For us, that's actually a little bit problematic. Like, that player might look really good in the data, but let's say we take a 23-year-old. He's young now, technically, under 23. But by the time we get to the point of being able to sell him, let's say 18 months' time, he might be 25. Suddenly you've got a slightly different return on investment profile for a player who's 25, right? He might be unbelievably good.
Yeah, he needs to be national team level in order to bring real revenue.
Exactly. And you might be able to break even, you might make a small profit, but the chances of you making a massive return on investment is relatively low. So the difference between a 23-year-old and a 21-year-old for us is quite a lot. So it's that kind of thing. So for us, with TransferLab, we have the ability to be flexible. It's the data working for our strategy. So it's kind of that way round. Whereas I think my understanding of the kind of Jamestown process is, and actually if you look at it, it's really interesting. You've got Brighton, it's embedded. It's Tony Bloom, really, let's be honest. It's the owner and it's his data, it's his models. So he's embedded it fully. You've got sporting directors that have left Brighton and not been particularly successful because they don't have that structure, that strategy, that,
Yeah. That's what Chelsea should buy, not all the players and the coaches from Brighton.
Chelsea's the example, right? They keep taking the pieces.
Moises Caicedo and Graham Potter and all of them.
Yeah. So then you look at Union Saint-Gilloise, again, completely embedded because he owns the club. Okay, technically he doesn't own the club, but he owns the club. And then he's bought Hearts. And you can see already the impact that he had there. They nearly won the league last year, but he is there. The kind of, let's say, outsourced influence of Jamestown, where it's clubs that are not, where those members of staff are not embedded. It's just a service to
Is that Como, for example?
So Como is a good example. I find Como is a good example. I find Como an interesting example. They went from spending, I looked at this, I did a bit of research on it, that they went from spending around about 3 to 4 million in transfer windows, and normally selling for a similar amount, to spending 150 million per transfer window. So we can talk about the success of the data, but at the same time, when you're spending 150 million a transfer window, you'd expect some pretty decent success, right?
Yeah, I didn't know
I know that Debrecen, for example, are a Jamestown club, so it'll be interesting to see how they get on. So there's a number of, obviously, we've got, Djurgården as well. So it'll be interesting to see how the kind of outsourced version of that kind of data process works, as opposed to the embedded one, which has been so successful at Brighton.
Right, because the way it's being utilized inside of Brighton is more similar to how TransferLab is utilized in AIK. But the way it's utilized in Djurgården is the way it's more of like a consulting service. Like, we will handle the scouting for you and provide you with the reports on the players you should buy.
Exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, that's fascinating. And I do think that they do probably a really good job at identifying like really, really, really good players in terms of data. And they claim to have like really good context on like, well, we can also determine how good he's going to be inside of your context or your league at least. So I think that they will do a really good job. My problem with that approach would have been that you're not building value inside of the club. You're basically outsourcing and building a dependency on a third party, which is fine if he owns the club like he does in Brighton, because he's going to keep on implementing it as long as he's there. But over time, I think for Djurgården or for any other club, you actually want to build the systems and the tools and the processes internally and not outsource something as important as transfers.
Yeah, and this is going back to the conversation that we had right at the start, which is kind of my role is to embed all that stuff in a way where if I walked away, it would still be here, right? It would still be part of the way that the club works. So, yeah, that the difference you mentioned there is pretty stark. And one is long-term sustainable, one is kind of short-term. Well, obviously, you could have the partnership for a long time, right? So it could be a long-term partnership, but it's not embedded.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it might just be transitory. Let's talk about the thing that everybody's talking about right now, which is the injuries.
Yeah.
So, just spill the guts. Tell us what's going on here.
Yeah, so I think, so we can be as transparent as I can be about it. Obviously, when it comes to injuries, it's there are kind of confidential things about players and this kind of thing. But basically, we're in a position where it was going to be around about this time of year anyway that the focus was going to turn to the medical and performance department. We employed 3 new members of staff in those 2 departments over the winter. So there was no point doing a review of things at that stage. We've been at least half a season to see how things were progressing. So that was kind of going to be part of my remit for this period of the season. As it happens, because of the kind of high volume of injuries that have occurred, we're putting in place something a little bit faster. So we want to do an investigation over what's been happening. So I think the biggest thing to say is that there are so many factors that could be at play that I don't want to kind of get ahead and kind of conclude things before you've done the research, because I just think that's a really bad way to go. You could start pointing fingers. Oh, it was because of this, it's because of bad pitches, or it's because of, new staff methods, or it's because of this type of training, or it's because of, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
To me, that doesn't make any sense.
No.
So we need to really do this properly. So the first thing to do is what we would call an injury audit. So basically it's to look back at the last probably 3 years worth of data. The data collection part is not an issue because we've got platforms inside the club where we've been collecting this data for a long time. So collecting the data is not a problem, but it's about then analysing that in a way that breaks down all the different possibilities. So we also need to look at where did we train? What was the transition like? So for example, let's say pre-season, we moved around quite a lot in pre-season. We were training at Stadshagen, we were training at Skytteholm, we were training inside the stadium, we were training on camp on grass, we then came back to Karlberg on grass. So lots of different types of surfaces. So again, it could be quality of surface, it could be the transition from surface to surface quite often. We were at Boson as well, so again, indoors. It could be to do with human resource. It could be to do with, it could be to do with facilities. It could be to do with training methods. It could be to do with load management. And again, what's going to be good about doing this process is we can do this injury audit, we can do the analysis, and then we can come up with solutions. And those solutions need to be controlled by us. So there's no point saying, oh, well, the pitches aren't good enough. Well, okay, fine. Well, we're not moving from Karlberg yet. We'll come to that as well, probably in terms of the training ground. But we're not moving yet. So, what is it that we can do about that? Not much. So, I think in terms of the solutions that we come up with, they have to be things that we can do quickly, that we can obviously monitor to see how that impacts what we do. Some of that will need investment. So we need to put together a really good proposal to the board before we confirm the budget for next year, the operating budget, so that we can invest more if we need to, that we can do certain things. So that's the process at the moment. We're going to do this investigation, come up with the solutions. We're actually going to do it together. So I've been speaking in depth with Peter Wemberg about how the academy can be part of this as well, because also we've seen, and again, I don't want to come up with the conclusions before, but just from a subjective perspective, I've seen that there is a trend between young players coming up to the first team and then immediately getting injured. So we need to prevent that from happening because these are assets as well. A player that comes up to the first team environment where we're thinking, hey, give this guy 18 months, this could be a top player, and then suddenly he's out for 8 months or whatever.
Andreas Zadok comes to mind.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing, is being able to present this in a way that says, here's how much it's costing us. This is why the investment is a good idea, and here are the areas that we want to invest. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be too long before we have that report ready. Then after that, it's about coming up with really concrete solutions, and solutions that we think will actually make an impact. And then it's about monitoring those solutions to see whether they worked or not. So yeah, it's a bit of a project. Yeah,
but I think that's the reassuring answer. On the other hand, I think that's what the supporters want to hear right now. It's just like, okay, what are we doing to actually understand it? It's fine to not have all the answers now or to shoot from the hip, but it's like I think most people want to see like what is being done in order to address this.
Yeah, and I also think it's important, again, and going back to the confidence of the staff inside the building, is that I think staff can feel a little bit blamed. So, the medical team, why are our players injured? The medical team aren't good enough. Well, okay, but players don't get injured by the medical staff, right? They get treated by the medical staff afterwards. So there's almost like, they can start to feel a bit defensive about the fact that, this is being said about our department or whatever. And it's like, well, okay, relax. When there's no blame being thrown around here, let's come up with the actual research. Let's come up with the reasons why these things happen, and let's come up with the solutions as to how we can fix it. And if you don't want to be on board with those things, that might be problematic. But if everyone's on board and everyone wants to improve, then, we'll take everyone with us. So, yeah.
And I think that's the difference between how professionals approach it, because I've seen people online or whatever in media saying like, no, I've come to the conclusion that we need to swap out the people in the medical team. And it's like, well, based on what data? So the fact that you guys are actually looking into it, trying to understand it first before drawing conclusions, sounds like a more responsible way to do it than to just point fingers.
Yeah, and let's be honest, it needs to be done. Yeah. I mean, I got to be honest, it's pretty unheard of, this level of injury rate. So something's happening. I think we'd be naive to think that everything, it's just pure bad luck.
Yeah.
So we need to get to the bottom of it.
You mentioned the new training ground. Is that above your pay grade, or are you involved in that in any way?
Yeah, a little bit. So involved in the discussions around the phases of it. Obviously, Fredrik Söderberg is leading the kind of the process together with Daniel Norlander. So in that sense, not involved in that part of it, but obviously as an update, there's some kind of final negotiations going on around kind of land acquisition and that kind of thing. So that part of it is still a little bit ongoing, and that's big in terms of the long-term kind of health of the club. But in terms of kind of design, in terms of kind of being ready to go, everything's ready to go. I think the move-in date is 2028. So everything's really kind of positive and everything's moving forward, but we just need to kind of, cross some T's, dot some I's to get everything kind of finalized. But for me, having a new training center would probably, again, not jumping ahead of myself on this kind of injury analysis, but probably would help in that department as well.
Yeah.
So
certainly wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to ask you about the transfer the remaining part of the transfer window now. So you said that like we built a little bit of a cash reserve with the Zadok Yohanna transfer, and now we're down to trying to shrink the squad quantity, maybe like reduce the number of players so we don't have too big of a squad.
Yeah.
Would you say that the main thing that needs to happen in order for us to strengthen the team now is to maybe have a little bit of a squad turnover, and I don't want to use the term get rid of some players, but like to sell off some players or not extend the contract of some players that frees up room to sign new players? Is that more of the bottleneck now than to find more capital?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think in terms of squad size, Mika's talked about that quite a lot in terms of getting the squad size down. Obviously, with the injuries that we've got, that's quite difficult. But yeah, bringing the squad size down is one part of that. I think one thing that we probably have to just come to a conclusion on is whether we're including kind of transition contracts in that number, because I think we don't want to limit ourselves if we spot a really high quality young talent, let's say an African talent, for example, that we want to sign and put them in the U19s for a period of time to develop, but that contract has to be on the first team budget, even if it's a smaller contract. I think we have to kind of decide whether our total squad number includes the transition players or doesn't include the transition players. I think we're kind of veering toward it not including the transition players and having that almost as a kind of separate...
Oh, I see.
Not a separate budget as such, but a separate number, and saying, look, here's the 25 that is the first team group, and then here's your kind of pipeline of players coming through, and we don't necessarily want to limit ourselves on that. So that's a discussion that we're having at the moment around how do we manage that optimal squad size at Karlberg. So we want to focus our resource on 25 players.
Yeah.
When you've got 35, it's crazy. There's not enough locker room space. There's not enough, staff to go around. The medical team are running around in the morning trying to do, rehab and treatment for, 10 different players before the start of training. And it's it becomes very, very difficult to manage. So the idea of getting down to 25 is exactly the right one, but we also don't want to limit our pipeline of players coming through. So again, that's just a strategic question that we just need to discuss and come to a conclusion on. And once we do, then no problem.
And this is happening because of the way football is changing, right? Because of historically, it's always been like, oh, we need this amount of players in our squad. A few of them are going to get sold. Let's see who. And now it's heading in the direction of like, well, wait a minute. It's like it's the players that are between 16 and 19 that go for these unreasonable amounts of money. So they kind of end up in this like twilight zone between the academy and the senior team. And now all of a sudden you get a chance on this 18-year-old African player and you're like, well, we kind of have enough players already in the squad, but this guy could, end up becoming a rocket ship in 6 months. So should we fit him into the senior team, or should he be considered an academy player? And that's why you're talking about like developing almost this like side pool of players that are truly assets, even though I don't love that word for players, but that's what they are.
Well, exactly. I mean, if you take a player like Mohamed Schiller, really talented young boy. He's basically training most sessions with the first team, but at the moment he's considered to be a transition player. He's based in the academy building. He doesn't have a locker room inside Kalbai. Mm-hmm. So at the moment, that's his categorization. He's one of those kind of in the middle kind of players. And the idea is that if you promote too fast, you end up with a player in your first team squad where you weren't sure whether he was of the right quality. So if he'd have come in straight away with a first team contract straight in, you're then putting someone who hasn't transitioned, that hasn't taken the time to understand where he is, the culture, the training regime, the intensity of things, and you don't give them any time. And I mean, we did it with Zadok as well. It was a much faster process with Zadok, obviously, because of the talent level, but he went into the academy building first.
Yeah, and tore it up.
Yeah. And so having that kind of middle ground, and then obviously we promoted him into the first team environment rather quickly. But having that kind of middle tier, I think is really important. And a lot of those discussions, and this is where the relationship with the academy has been fantastic this year. And I must again give props to them, because in terms of the quality of talent that comes through, also the quality of person, the academy players who are promoted into the first team environment, they're all really good people.
Yeah, they are.
So I think the combination of that has at times saved us, as it did at the weekend. Threadbare squad, we bring up academy players, they get on the pitch, they do the business, they come in and at least hold their own. So I think that's a really big thing. But having that conversation every single week with the academy and talking about how do we manage this? Where does this player sit? Is this one of your players? Is this a first team player? How do we organize this together? And I think, again, I mentioned it earlier about silos, people having their own kingdoms. That just isn't the case when it comes to academy first team. Those discussions happening every week, which is really great. I mean, we have those meetings every 2 weeks are so productive. And yeah, like I say, everyone's really, I think they bring ideas to the table. Yeah. And I think that's the big thing.
Because those players are also usually more affordable, right? So you could end up signing 4 or 5 of those instead of signing one senior team player. So you kind of want to have almost like a separate budget for those that aren't, it won't be affecting the run rate the same way, but also stacking a few of those players surely going to pay dividends over time.
Yeah, but it's also that there's also a flip side of that, which I think me and Mika have agreed is something where we've seen it in our past clubs as well. If you give too much too soon to young players, there's almost like an expectancy that, well, if I'm playing well for the U19s, I'll be a first team player. And it's like, well, you have to earn that. So you need to take the time to come up, train, earn your position. And if you then get promoted into the first team squad, you've earned that. It's not too easy. So if you make it too easy, there's almost an expectancy that, oh, well, I'm going to be a first team player. Well, no, you haven't done enough yet.
Right.
So there's that balancing act between the two. But you're right, in terms of run rate, promoting a youth team player to the first team, I mean, it hardly impacts the run rate at all, really.
No, and even the players we signed directly to the academy, or these, I mean, there's kind of these African players now, they're being signed, like Oreo that came in, who is like, Harish was pretty clear about it. Like, this guy is not going to be in competition for any starting 11 positions in the senior team for quite a while. Yep. But we want him developing in our academy. So that's kind of like a hybrid signing, which is he is an external player from a different part of the world, but traditionally those have been first team signings. Now we're kind of letting them cook down in the academy for a while.
And that's exactly it. It's just giving them time. There needs to be a development process. And I think that's another area which is a focus for probably more for next year, but it's something which has already been put in place for this year, and there's definitely more of a focus on it, is individual player development. We need to do more there. We need to invest a little bit more there. We need to give players who are not quite ready for the first team more exposure, more training sessions, more individualized coaching, more individualized, sports science support, more individualized strength and conditioning work. So that's the bit where we just need to increase that that resource for them. And that also ties into the training ground discussion about when you have a bigger training ground, when you have the facilities and the space to be able to do those things, then and more pitch space as well. And so, yeah, all of these things are kind of tied in together over the next kind of 1, 2, 3 years.
How do you see the step from the academy team to the senior team now? We don't have like Hammarby does with the HTFF team where they can go and play senior football. We kind of have a partnership with the Enköping. We have some players going on loan to the Norwegian second division and whatnot. How are you in 2026 looking at that gap and the step in between?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The loan program, not too many players have been out on loan this year, but the loans that have taken place have been pretty good. So obviously Vilma did half a season with Moss. We were really pleased with him, but we were also really pleased with Moss.
Okay. Because
the feedback process that we put in place there was really good. So we were getting constant feedback. We knew exactly how he was doing. We had regular contact with their sporting director. So everything, the process that we put in place for loans, really, really strong. With Gonno, a little bit different because he's not getting game time at all. So it's whether the loan has been successful or not is questionable, but obviously the process has been okay. So in terms of that process, we need to do probably more. Need to give more exposure to players. The avenue for exposure with Enköping should be better. I think we all need to kind of, we have all come to that conclusion. The communication with Enköping is excellent. I mean, the people there are fantastic. We communicate regularly. I think the problem is that they, of course, have to select their own squad. They have to assess players in the way that they feel is right for their club. But we do feel that we could have done more this year in terms of players going there. We'd always want more minutes for our players. So at the moment, Sixten played and scored there. In the past, last season, we had Stanley and we had Kevin, so it was really beneficial for them. But we have quite a lot of P19 players. We have quite a lot of players on the fringes of the first team where we have offered and pushed those to Enköping, but they haven't been the profile of player that they wanted at that particular time, or that the head coach was happy to bring. So
it's not conflict of interest with building asset value for them, or?
No, there's not been any discussion about that. It's purely been based on player profile. That's, for us, that's slightly disappointing because in our, obviously, we're in a position where the partnership needs to work. We need to be able to say, we have a young player that needs minutes. Yeah. We want to send them to you. And how, can you find a position for them to play? Yeah. And if the answer is always no, that's slightly problematic.
That's the problem.
So that's the bit where we just need to revisit that a little bit, have those discussions with Enköping. We obviously are not in a position to, like Hammarby, to control that environment. So that's very clear, and we're not looking to do that.
Maybe in a few years when AIK Framtid gets there, but that's a few years down the line.
Yes, yeah, I'll come back to that one in a second. So with Enköping, it's one of those where it's not been plain sailing this year, but not through want of trying. So I think we can get back to a really good position, but I think probably it means very, very early planning. So looking at their team for next year and saying, okay, we have these players. Do not fill those positions, please, because you can take this player, and this player. Can we come to an agreement now for you to be able to do that? I think the problem this year was that Mika was new, head coach is new. So when we went to training camp, we basically took everyone. Yeah. And therefore, immediately, because obviously we want to give those players a chance. And let's be honest, it was a pretty good idea in the end, because players like Stanley Wilson, who might otherwise have gone very early, were looked at in depth, made his mark, did really well, and now clearly a first team player at AIK. So in my view, we need to just refresh, come up with, not start from scratch, but start the process early for next year. Have those conversations as early as possible in terms of squad planning from Enköping's perspective, and then they will feel much more comfortable, I think, with the players that end up coming in for them. So yeah, been a slightly difficult one for this particular period.
Their squad planning needs to take whatever assets we have available into account, basically.
And we're not saying you have to take this player or you have to. It's not.
It would be good if.
But having that conversation early for them to feel comfortable and not then fill those positions otherwise with players who, they might not have signed if they'd have, known very, very early that they had access to this player.
Yeah, makes sense. And you said you'd come back to AIK Framtid, so.
Yeah, so that's again another one that. it's kind of in the middle at the moment. Is it an FF project? Is it a Kalberg project? Is it, and they've obviously got their own sporting director.
Yeah.
So we need to kind of find, and again, that's another project which, we need to really sit down and think about how it fits. At the moment, obviously Division 4 is too far away from what we would need in terms of, player development for the players we're talking about there with Enköping. So it's something which, we need to figure out how it fits into our structure and then how much resource to give it to build it up to the level where we need it to be. The only issue, I guess, is that obviously the Swedish FA are looking at what these partner clubs look like and kind of dual ownership and all this kind of stuff. So
there's what you would call regulatory risk.
Exactly, and I think that's slightly problematic in terms of pumping lots of resource into it and then finding that
gets shut down.
Yeah. So all of these things are being discussed internally, but that's one that we need to focus on soon.
Because if you develop a loan program and you do it well enough, you put them in the right teams, you get the right kind of reports. It's kind of like a cheat code where you can have more players on your squad list than you would otherwise be able to do.
Yeah, kind of. And if you go back to the conversation we had previously about the transition players, that's where you'd put them, right?
Yeah.
They'd go straight in there. They'd get loads of game time. They could start with the 19s and then move into that group, and then suddenly you've got another environment, but it's your environment.
But is that developing now? Because almost every team now wants to build squad value themselves, so loaning players is like kind of a last resort. But is that kind of changing where you can give them incentives or a sell-on clause if they develop the player or something like that?
Yeah, we've looked at that.
Yeah. That's interesting. Okay, before we wrap up, do you have time for just a couple of listener questions?
Yeah, sure.
From the account Bubbe, is there a feedback mechanism in Transfer Lab when signing does not end up the way you were hoping it? Can the results be used to improve the algorithm and future selection?
Not necessarily in Transfer Lab itself, but obviously we do that. So we always do a kind of feedback loop on transfers. So you can make a bad decision and it turns out well, and you can make a good decision and it doesn't turn out well. Mm-hmm. So I think it's more about kind of looking at the process and whether we got the process right. There was a couple of times last year where me and Fredrik Wiese sat down and went through the process of a transfer and said that's not how we want to do it in the future. Mm-hmm. So certain hoops were not jumped through, certain things were kind of avoided because you really want that player, you want to get that player in the building, and therefore you kind of jump a step.
Yeah.
So we had those conversations, and it was already last year that we wanted to make sure that those things didn't happen again. When Mika's come in, obviously he works in this way anyway, so it was very easy to then sit with him and go, okay, are we doing it correctly?
He's following the protocol.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, those protocols can be all sorts of things, right? So, going through from the scouting process to the contracting process to the medical process, all of those things are now being done really professionally. And I think what it does is it avoids the risk of making an error. Mm-hmm. You can never know how a transfer is going to start. Transfers are really hard. I think people forget that. I mean, I think it was Ian Graham, the former Liverpool head of research, did a talk in London at one point, and he said that 50% of transfers fail.
50% across the board.
Across the board. And even when you're doing it right.
Wow.
So, I think people have to understand that is the world that we live in football. We're talking about people, we're talking about humans, we're talking about head coaches, we're talking about injuries, we're talking about moving countries, we're talking about bringing family, not bringing family, these kind of things. So it's not just about was the data good, did the player, play well, not play well. There are lots of things around it. So I think in terms of the process, that's the important thing. Did we do the process correctly?
Yeah.
Did we reduce the risk? And if we didn't, and then something happens, that's on us. But if we did all the process correctly and something goes wrong, okay, we can kind of sit and not be happy with it, but we can sit and say, okay, we did everything we could physically do.
Yeah. What do you think the gold standard is? What could someone strive for? What kind of percentage of conversion rate or hit rate?
Well, I think what the point that Ian Graham was trying to make was that 50% is good. That's for a good club.
That's for a good club?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Liverpool went through, at that time under Michael Edwards, I think they went through a ridiculous period of almost every transfer was a hit for about 4 seasons or something, or 4 transfer windows, and that's why they went from being 6th in the Premier League to winning the Champions League, right?
Yeah.
So, but I don't think he puts that down necessarily to them being, gods of the transfer market. It's just they got a little bit lucky, or maybe they were hitting 60 or 70% when the average is 50, but then it always comes back to that number. So.
Yeah. This question is kind of fascinating from Martin. Can data capture the kind of attributes? And I think I want to actually build on this to make it a wider question. He's asking about a specific player, but he's saying, can data capture the kind of attributes that a player like Yannick Geiger has that almost makes it look like he's playing in slow motion because he's so skilled? But I want to build on that to say, like, are there attributes in players where you have to actually find what is the data that represents this kind of attribute?
Yeah. And I think that's exactly what we're trying to do when we're building our player profiles, is you're trying to find that player in the data, which then saves you time on the video. So, as I mentioned before, with Mehmed bringing a certain player or players, you kind of know already because the data's already captured what we're looking for. So you know what you're probably going to be watching. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really nice. So exactly that. So if we're looking for, let's say, another Yannick Geiger in the data, then it should be relatively consistent that these are the metrics that need to be above a certain level. Then when you go to the video, you already know what you're going to be watching. There's one metric, I won't mention which metric, but there's one metric which is really, really has a really high correlation to future performance of wingers, mm-hmm. of which Zadok was in the top 1% for Allsvenskan. And so it's one of those where now we know that if we're looking for a player that does certain things that Zadok was doing, that we can go and find that in the data. And we know that when we go to the video, we're going to see that type of player and see those types of actions. So for me, that metric's really good fun, actually. You can jump into Y-Scout and you can see players doing fun things, beating players 1v1, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Hey, Jeremy, it's been an amazing hour and change. Always fun to talk to you. Really glad to have you on board. Sounds like you guys are doing a great job. So, yeah, just keep at it.
Thanks for having me. Thanks.